Hello everyone, my name is Paul Roberts and I want to tell you a most amazing story. It's a story of intrigue and illicit affairs that happened over 200 years ago, with changes in names, and it involves the Industrial Revolution in England and military service in India, the last Zulu War in South Africa, and then the greatest diamond rush that ever occurred, and then the gold rush to the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. And the identity of the hero of the story and of his parents and grandparents were all discovered using DNA. This is the story of my great-grandfather, Richard Charles Roberts. Richard was born in Birmingham in 1858, Birmingham, England, and ended up serving in the military in India, and then was drafted to South Africa to fight in the last Zulu War in 1879. And from there he participated in the great diamond rush to Kimberley, searching to seek his fortune. Didn't happen. And then the gold rush onto the Witwatersrand, the greatest gold rush ever, to seek his fortune there. Didn't happen. And he ended up dying in 1929 at the age of 71, still working hard on the mines. But his birth name was not Richard Charles Roberts. I have used a large number of sources in researching our family history, but the one I've used definitely the most is Ancestry.com. With their large database and large number of members, it was the most successful. The next was FamilySearch.org, great for searching out documents to provide evidence. Their new large worldwide family tree is a great benefit I'll talk about later. The DNA, the first DNA I sent in was to Family Tree DNA, and then Ancestry.com and 23andMe have all been helpful, as well as MyHeritage. So using a large combination has proved very helpful. Throughout my story, the DNA evidence came first, and then I could find the documents to support the DNA. The DNA has proved to be the major key in solving this mystery. But first of all, why genealogy? Who cares? Well, I want to tell you about how I got involved in genealogy and what it means to me, and at the end I'll list the benefits that I see of having genealogy as a hobby. So this story revolves around the mystery of Richard Charles Roberts, my great-grandfather. So that's him up there, born in 1858, and my great-grandmother, Maria Sophia Brousseau. Their son, Walter Edward Baden Roberts, was my grandfather, born in 1900, and he died in 1974. And my grandmother was Agnes Winter. She was born Wachowski, but her father changed their name to Winter in 1909. They had 3 sons, my uncle Stanley, Kenneth, and my dad Vernon. And I'm down here. My mom is still alive, so I've obscured her face and that of my aunt. Everyone else in the slide is dead. And my mom's parents were Paul William Duplessis. The Duplessis were French Huguenot descendants who first came to South Africa in 1688. And my mom's mother was Isabel Susan Atwell. And her ancestors came to South Africa in 1820, and they were British. So that gives you an idea of our immediate tree and where we started. I was born in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, then known as Southern Rhodesia, and both my father and mother were also born in Southern Rhodesia, but their parents all came from South Africa. My dad's father, Walter, was born in Johannesburg, and his father, Richard Charles Roberts, was born in Birmingham, England, but we know fought in the last Zulu War at Ulundi and then got married in Port Elizabeth, now Quebeca, and then mined on the diamond mines in Kimberley, and lived in Johannesburg working on the gold mines there until he died. My mom's ancestors on the Duplessis side arrived in Cape Town in 1688, French Huguenots, settled in and developed vineyards in the Cape, and eventually had a family farm, a sheep farm in Queenstown in this part of the country. And that farm was still in existence when I was a child, and we often stopped there on vacation and spent a few days living on the family farm, meeting all the relatives. My mom's mother's family came to South Africa with the 1820 settlers from England, and they settled in this part of South Africa, a large English area, and then gradually immigrated up through the country and settled in what was Southern Rhodesia at the time. And this is where the family history started. My mom, with her father, mother, and brother Ivan, was taken in about 1939. That was when this photograph was taken in Bulawayo, Southern Rhodesia. My mom was always interested in family history. My grandmother had a large extended family all living in Southern Rhodesia, and they were all very close to each other. There were lots of family get-togethers and visits out to spend a weekend with family, and the extended family were all very close. And even as when we were children, we were always out visiting old uncles and aunts of my mom's with cousins and second cousins, and getting to know all the extended family. And from when she was a little girl, my mom was interested in the family. She wanted to hear all the old stories from the old uncles and aunts, and there were wonderful stories. My grandmother's one brother had a pet baboon, and he used to tell stories of how the antics this baboon got up to when they were children out in the bush. So my mom was interested in the family, was collecting old family photographs and collecting stories from my grandmother and her relatives. Here's a lovely old photograph of my mom, taken in about 1942 when she was about 10 or 11 years old. And she has this fish that she's caught. The rod next to her was a gift from her father. My grandfather made the fishing rod for my mom, and he was very proud of her having caught this large fish. My mom wanted to collect all the old family photographs, so she got together with my grandmother, and many family members gave her photographs, and together they went through and labeled them so we would know who the family members were. I continued collecting the photographs and cataloguing them. Restoring the old family photographs is a fun part of my genealogy hobby. Here is a photograph of my great-grandparents on my mom's side, Philippus Andres Duplessis and Anna Elizabeth Ferreira, taken in about 1920. As you can see, there's a tear in the photograph here. There's various marks and watermarks, and the photograph is a little fuzzy. However, using the enhancing software on MyHeritage, I was able to sharpen up their faces and add some color, and then paint out those marks and splotches that made the photograph look very old and worn. So a great improvement to an old family portrait. This photograph was taken in about 1917, and it was very badly damaged. This top corner up here was torn off, and this whole bottom edge is missing. This guy's right shoe was missing, and it was a little blurred. That is my mom's father, my grandfather, Paul William Duplessis, and this was his confirmation, taken in about 1917. So I enhanced the photograph with MyHeritage, and then with Microsoft Paint just painted out the tears. Painted in this guy's shoe. I didn't paint in their legs. That would have been a little too taxing, but just made the tear less obvious and painted in this corner. So overall, the painting looks a lot, the picture is not a painting, looks a lot better than the photograph we have, and probably looks a lot more like it actually looked to the photographer on that day in 1917. So it's nice to have both photographs on the family tree. This is an old photograph of an infant that was so very faded I didn't think I'd have much success in bringing it back. But I just wanted to show you what can be done with just the simple MyHeritage enhancing software and using Microsoft Paint. I initially just increased the contrast in the image, and then I enhanced the clarity. And immediately the face of the baby came up, and I was very impressed. And then I added color, and that certainly brought the image to life. You can see all this irregularity and the roughness in the image. That was all over the face, but I used Microsoft Paint to brush it out smoothly. But as you can see, it's just amazing that from this very poor original image, we could bring up such a result. So my mom had been recording family history from the early 1950s and developing a tree. This is the tree on Ancestry.com, and I'll just show a little of what you can do with it for those of you who don't have Ancestry.com. But my mom was down here. These are my mom's parents, Paul William Duplessis and Isabel Susan Atwell. This is showing the Duplessis tree. If I click on the little blue man and pink woman next to my grandmother, then it'll bring up her side of the tree. And these arrows all indicate there are more siblings of these people. If I just click on it, it'll open up all their siblings. But the Duplessis line was the line of the French Huguenots. And as you can see, I've got a picture of a house there. That's a painting of the farm house, which indicates that to me was the first ancestor to get the family farm. He was born in 1799. And we can go back, just click on the up arrow to get his parents, and go back generation by generation. And my mom had traced all of these people back before the internet. Took months and months just to find the information on one generation. And my mom had traced back to Jean-Pierre Duplessis. I have a ship indicating these three, Jean and Maria and their son Charles, came to South Africa on that ship, the Oosterland, in 1688. And if we click on Jean-Pierre, we come to his facts page in Ancestry, which tells us all about him, when and where he was born, his marriages, the children of his spouses, and his death, with all the attached documentary evidence, as well as a gallery. And in the gallery, I've attached all the information. I have stories about Jean-Pierre, the Huguenots' signatures, a list of passengers on that little ship, the Oosterland. And if we just click on it, it opens it up. And we can see on this little ship, only 160 feet long, these were French Huguenot passengers and their families. And everyone I've highlighted in color is an ancestral group of mine. So a whole bunch of my ancestors were on that same tiny ship in 1688. And there's Jean-Pierre, Magdalena Menentauer or Maria, and Charles Pierre. It's just amazing to see the detail we can discover about our ancestors. Another interesting little fact about Jean-Pierre is that he was the surgeon on the ship, and in April 1689, one of the settlers was killed, and that's the death summary written in French by Jean-Pierre, my 7th great-grandfather. So it is quite amazing what we can discover about our history and attach to the tree. Even more interesting, the evil Cardinal Richelieu of the Three Musketeers fame was a Duplessis. He was Armand Duplessis. The Duplessis I have indicated with a crest were Lord Richelieu's. Lord Richelieu was a title of the various Duplessis, and the Cardinal Richelieu is on our tree. He's a distant cousin of one of my ancestors. It's interesting and fun to add famous people to your tree, even if they're not closely related. This is my mom's mother's side of the tree. My mom's mother's parents are here, Henry Percival Atwell and Dorothea Ferreira. Henry Atwell, his family came out with the 1820 British settlers to South Africa, and Henry's brother Frederick is an uncle of the Prime Minister of Rhodesia, Ian Douglas Smith. And I've also have the British royal family on my tree. They distantly related just through marriage, but it's fun to include them just as a matter of interest. But tracing my mom's family back, my mom had them traced, the Atwells traced back into England. James Atwell was born in Battleston, Bedfordshire, and we visited there and have pictures of the church where they were married and buried and baptized. But my mom knew that part of her family were Irish, but not sure exactly where, and we have them all traced back to Louis Mears, born in 1625, and he is my 10th great-grandfather, and he was born in England, but when England invaded Ireland, he was an officer in the army, so he ended up seizing some land, and he built his home, Mears Courthouse. If we have a look at the facts, we can see that he acquired the property on the 3rd of December, 1667. And this is the home that he built, Mears Courthouse, which I discovered was available as a bed and breakfast. And so we went and stayed in this home in Ireland that our family lived in through the later 1600s, 1700s, for many generations. And it was absolutely beautiful to stay there and imagine our ancestors living in that home with no idea that their descendants would be living in South Africa, Rhodesia, Australia, the United States. Just incredible. Here again is our local family tree. My mom and dad at the bottom, and my mom had traced her parents' families all the way back. She had a book of her tree on the Duplessis family, and back in the 1990s, as the software became available for Family Tree Maker, I began transferring my mom's tree onto the computer and scanning in all the photographs. Then, as the internet became available and Ancestry.com was available, I was able to transfer all of that information onto Ancestry.com, and we now have over 22,000 people on our tree. So this was all great, and tons of information, hundreds and hundreds of old family photographs that instead of sitting in a box somewhere in someone's closet are now all available online and can be shared with family around the world. But There was this block in our tree with Richard Charles Roberts. We had no idea who his parents were and actually what his real name was. We had pretty much everybody else sorted out. This is my dad's mother, Agnes Wachowski, otherwise known as Winter. Her ancestors, both sides, came from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Wachowskis came from what is now southwestern Poland in the Posen area, and her mother's family, the Pochniks, came from the Czech Republic. So we knew that they were Eastern European. My dad's father's mother, her parents came from northern Germany. The Brousseaus came from the Uckermark region and immigrated to Africa in the late 1800s. So my dad's father's father was the only English blood, and that was Richard Charles Roberts. We knew he came from Birmingham, but he was a complete stone wall in our tree. Finally, here is a photograph of Richard Charles Roberts and his wife Maria Sophia Brousseau, taken in the 1920s, shortly before he died. Richard Charles Roberts was a man of mystery, and we will learn more about him. Finally, I'd like to summarize what I see as the benefits of studying genealogy. First of all, it's a great mystery-solving detective work kind of hobby. If you like detective TV shows, this is the hobby for you. Also, the cold case file TV shows. That's what Richard Charles' story became in our family, and it was eventually solved through DNA. We can learn our ancestors' place in history. Studying history, I hated it at school, but have read many history books since leaving school and enjoy it now. And it's far more enjoyable if you know who of your ancestors were living, which wars they were involved in. It's great if you can go back and visit those places now knowing which ancestors were involved. A great byproduct of this research is the restoration and sharing of the old family photographs. Instead of them lying lost in some trunk in an attic where no one gets to see them, they are now online and can be shared with all the family worldwide. We can record the details of our family's history for the future, so that future generations can enjoy studying them, and many of the details would have been lost if we didn't record them now. As part of this, we can also write the stories of our ancestors that we knew. So these provide a long-lasting eulogy for our grandparents. We can describe them, the kind of people they were, what they liked to do, and repeat some of their stories they told, so that future generations can read them and get to know their ancestors. We will make friends with extended family through the process. We will get to know second cousins and third cousins studying the tree and other parts of the world, and it's great fun getting to know distant family. And finally, we can trace our prehistoric history, going back thousands and thousands of years, using Y-DNA. That is why I study genealogy. But to get back to the story, our great problem was the stone wall with Richard Charles Roberts. On the wall behind me, you'll see a few of my family memorabilia. There's a Martini Henry rifle, which are the rifles that the British soldiers used in the last Zulu War. And next to it is a photograph of Richard Charles Roberts. In the next episode, I will let you know what we knew about Richard Charles Roberts and what we didn't know and why we didn't know it.